in the direction of an economic interpretation. Because if it was simply witches are being killed because they're doing bad things, they could be causing the disease epidemic, so we should be killing them then. We're actually kind of using this people are using this justification of witches doing bad things when there's an economic shock. So it's a little piece of evidence that kind of points in the direction of the theory that I've been talking about. So this is the actual tail. I'm trying to it's a little bit small, but we have different regressions. I want to focus on the first column, and this is a regression where the outcome is annual per capita consumption expenditures in our data. And it's regressed on a dummy indicator variable for having an extreme rainfall shock, those 18% of years. And you can see there's a minus 50 or 51 effect in terms of dollars per capita. So by a drop of about $50 per capita, where the mean consumption is about $200. So in other words, if there's a drought and your crops fail, your income falls by about a quarter. That's a huge shock. So this is a very meaningful income effect due to drought. But it's very interesting. In column 2, the only change is we also added the controls just below the red box for human disease epidemic. The standard errors are pretty similar to the income shock, but really there's a very small point estimate, like close to zero. So it doesn't look like, if a few people died in the village from measles or cholera, that has much of an effect on income in that year. Obviously, it's awful for those affected and their families, but it's a relatively limited phenomenon. A drought in a whole area basically affects everybody's livelihood in a very big way. The other thing to look at in column 5 is there's not much of a correlation between extreme rainfall and disease epidemics. It's a close to zero correlation. You see the standard error there is 0.04, so the t-stat is less than 1. So these disease epidemics aren't like being driven by high rainfall or low rainfall. They're kind of two independent processes that are going on in our data. I mean, you could imagine some infectious diseases like cholera would relate to rainfall, but it just doesn't come through in the data here. Let me pause for a second. What else do you guys see in the data that's interesting, or what other patterns come through? There's a lot of coefficient estimates here. Yeah. If you drop it, you also get a very small coefficient estimate. I didn't show it here. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the data, and then let's just talk about the main findings and get on to some of the implications. The main finding is in these extreme rainfall years, the drought years, which leads to these big drops in incomes, you see a big increase in witch killing. That's the kind of main finding of the paper, killing and attacks. But no impact on the non-witch murders. It's kind of interesting. You might imagine that in periods with resource scarcity and economic shock, you might see violence increasing in many different dimensions. And in fact, there's a lot of evidence saying in the US that when it's very hot, there's more violent crime of many kinds. There's something about hot temperatures that may lead to more aggression, for instance. But we don't find any effect on the non-witch murders. And it's not clear exactly why. A lot of those non-witch murders in this data have to do with disputes over cattle herds, when we actually got the causes of the data. So it's people who are clashing over pasture in this semi-arid area, often people across villages who come into contact. And so again, you might have thought there'd be more of those conflicts in the drought years, but it's not coming through in the data. There's a non-trivial share of those murders that are also the equivalent of bar fights, where two basically young men who get in a fight or have a dispute, and one of them kills the other. So those are kind of the two main classes of non-witch murders. The bar fight, you might imagine, would be less correlated with income, and maybe there's always some base level of violence. But the kind of cattle raids and whatnot might have responded to economic conditions, but they don't really as much here. Oh, I'm sorry, wow, what a cough. And the other pattern is in villages where a higher share of the population believes in traditional religions based on surveys, they tend to have the largest increases in witch murders in the drought and flood years. So that's interesting in that it points towards some combination of economic effects and cultural circumstances that lead to these killings. So it may not be enough to have the economic shock. In order to have witch killings increase, you may need an economic shock together with a strong cultural belief in these phenomena, in these supernatural powers and the power of witches. And in that case, you get witch killing. Can anybody think of an alternative interpretation for this kind of pattern beyond the cultural interpretation? There is at least one other possible interpretation. Yeah, so maybe the places with lots of adherents of traditional religions differ in their economic circumstances. So it turns out the areas with more traditional religious belief tend to be a little poorer, tend to be a little more remote. So like in the district capital and the larger villages and towns, there's more Christians and Muslims, there's been more missionary activity, there are more churches, whatever. So this may also be proxying for some dimension of socioeconomic status. Now we control for a lot of those dimensions, but maybe we're missing one, right? And maybe this correlates a little bit with that. Yeah.
Is there what is the criteria of movement? Are they congregation based or are they?
They're not congregation based. There's a lot of really interesting religious institutions, you could call them institutions, that occur after the harvest. There's a very well developed set of harvest festivals that include traveling musical and theatrical troops, really. And what they do is they gather in different villages at different points after the harvest. People brew traditional beer, there's a lot of celebrating, and there's competitions between the dance troops. Those are traditions that the historians and anthropologists actually say were incredibly widespread in East Africa 100 years ago, for instance. But in most of East Africa, with development, modernization, Christian missionary activity, etc., have basically disappeared. But in this part of Tanzania, they exist. I've attended some of these. I went to a couple of these dance competitions, you could call them, or that makes it sound too frivolous, but because there is a communal and religious and spiritual component to this, to the rituals that go on. But it's actually very distracting for a foreigner to be there in this area where there aren't many foreigners. Because it's so unusual and kind of out of place. But that still goes on as part of Tanzania, although it's changing even in this part of Tanzania. When I was working in this district in 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, there was no phone line to the district. So there was an internal phone system with like 20 phone numbers in the district capital, and they had this radio transmitter to send emails because there was no phone line. It was very remote. Now everybody has a cell phone there, and there's lots of banks, and it's a totally different, it's developed a lot. But with that, presumably a lot of the traditional festivals will disappear. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a very rich set of rituals, gatherings, and institutions where these sort of drumming and dance festivals are really an institution that took place every year in a very organized way. So, did you ever hand up to? Yeah, Lauren. There is a correlation, yeah. The more remote and somewhat poorer, etc. areas tend to have more adherents of traditional religion. To some extent, the one thing that happens at the edge of the district in Meatu is the edge of the district starts being dominated by some other ethnic groups, and then there's sort of a little bit of a different logic to where they are relative to their sort of district capitals and whatnot. Yeah. And that's one of the things that's actually changed because there's actually been increased gold mining and other mining in western Tanzania in the last decade. And so, but whereas at this time they were very minimal, those opportunities. So again, with economic opportunities elsewhere, you can change N without going through this. So I think, the witch killings are still occurring. If you read the Tanzanian press or you do a Google search on this, it's still a big political issue. They're still going on. But you would think that there would be economic realities. You're making a very good point that would change the logic of this. David.
In terms of what are the enforcement mechanisms, repercussions like that kind of thing? It seems like because they're rich, it's probably more likely to get away with with A, B, it's
Yeah.
also within your own family. Like, I can see some different family members that
Yeah.
generations kind of go on, but also you can't compare everybody what's in other families.
Yeah, I think both of your points make perfect sense. So in this area, there's, and I think I maybe mentioned this institution once before, there's an elders council called the Sungu Sungu. It's not just found in this part of Tanzania, but elsewhere, which is really the sort of continuation of the old pre-colonial elders council. And their main role, they're actually an official subcommittee of the village council. They were recognized. After independence in the 60s and into the 70s, the Tanzanian state banned chiefs. They actually abolished chiefdom, and they banned these elders councils. But in the 80s, actually during the economic crisis, in the 80s, there was a lot of mass organizing in this part of Western Tanzania to try to reconstitute the elders councils, and the government made a decision, instead of trying to fight them, to basically incorporate them into the village council as a subcommittee. And the Sungu Sungu are the subcommittee responsible for village security. They're kind of like coordinating punishment for crimes and whatnot. And so they would be the people you would take this to. Again, if it's within your own family, there's fewer people, no one to complain, or fewer people to complain about this, A. And B, the Sungu Sungu see fighting witchcraft as one of their main responsibilities, because accusations are widespread. Witchcraft accusations are widespread. It's a major cause of people's problems. So they typically look the other way. But what happened again in the 70s, this is during basically the revolutionary period in Tanzania. It was a socialist government that was trying to enforce villagization, pushing people into villages, and educational reforms and other things. They started cracking down on people killing witches. So they actually tried to get the government police force to prosecute people. They took people to court, and there was a huge outcry in this part of Tanzania saying, I think I mentioned this last time, the fear among the government at that point is people were saying, wait a minute, you're siding with the witches rather than with the citizens. And who's siding on the witches are the bad people. We're getting rid of them so we can have peace in our villages, and you're siding with them. And so there's very little prosecution of witch killers in Tanzania today, although there's increasing activism, mainly by women's groups in Tanzania, to try to do something about this problem. So there's a long history of this. What to do with witchcraft accusations and those who killed witches was a big deal in the colonial period with the British. The British were trying to figure out what to do about something that they opposed and the churches opposed, but there's basically been a hands-off policy for the most part. Okay, so this is the main regression of the table. If you look at column 1, table 4, this is a regression of the number of witch murders on the extreme rainfall indicator variable. I'm not going to talk about the controls and stuff as much now. I'm going to come back to what fixed effects are in a couple lectures briefly. It's not going to be a main focus, but you can see the coefficient estimate there is 0.085. What does that mean? That means in a drought or a flood year, the number of witch murders in a village goes up by 0.085 in that year. The mean level of that variable is 0.09. So roughly speaking, there's a doubling in witch murders in years of drought and flood. So there are some witch murders in other years. There's some witch murders going on for other reasons. There are other witch murders going on because of some other type of problem, some household-specific issue, whatever it is. But it doubles in these extreme rainfall years. So that's a very strong effect. And I want you to just focus on the other column. I want you to focus on is column 4. So if you look at column 4, you see the same effect on extreme rainfall at 0.085. But if you look at human disease epidemics, you basically see a 0. So there's no witch killing, no increased witch killing when there's a measles outbreak, when there's a cholera outbreak. Those are the two main ones, actually. So it doesn't look like that other type of shock that witches might be responsible for is leading to these attacks. As we showed before, there's also not very strong economic consequences, at least in the short run, of those kinds of shocks. Yeah.
Is that because the human disease epidemics are including your only, like, the disease that children where people were dying there, like, productively, right?
Maybe, so that could be part of the story. It doesn't have much of an economic consequence because maybe it's a very young infant. I mean, for measles and cholera, very young children are most affected, and of course they're not productive. What's another reason why after a disease epidemic you wouldn't see the witch killing? Within the logic of the model? Exactly. So even if there were some economic shock, it didn't come through in the data, but let's say we were mismeasured, there really is an economic shock, you've already gone from n to n-1, maybe. And so there's less pressure on resources, actually. So, I mean, the point estimate there is negative, but it's basically very close to 0. I wouldn't overinterpret the negative point estimate, but if that were negative and large, it would be something that would make us start thinking about that kind of rationale. Okay, last, I think, set of results, and then we'll talk about interpretation. So the first red box just reproduces what I just showed you. If you go down to the third row, you see murders and attacks. And so there the point estimate is only marginally significant at 90%, but you can see that, the risk of a murder or an attack goes up a lot, basically. So there's some attacks that are also being generated in these extreme rainfall years, whereas non-witch murders really have a zero relationship with these shocks, these economic shocks. And again, less than I would have thought. I would have thought there might be something because economic scarcity can cause lead to tension and conflict between people, but it doesn't really come through as much. What we don't have here is we don't have much at all on property crime. So when we were asking about crime, of course, we asked back 10 years. We really focused on murder. We did surveys in 2001 and 2002, but we asked every village back 10 years what happened. We thought murders are pretty salient events. They're pretty rare. Only once every 10 years you have a witch murder. Only once every 10 years you have a non-witch murder in a village. People kind of remember those 2 or 3 cases. Whereas if we tried to get quantitative data on crime, we would have to do a different sort of survey. So we didn't collect as much of that data. So it could be the case that in these extreme rainfall years, when stuff is scarce, you do see more property crime because people are desperate, but maybe not murder. And there's some evidence in the criminology literature that property crime is what responds the most actually to economic circumstances, and the causes of violent crime are actually much more complex. So that could be one part of the picture. Okay, so let me give a little more background, and we'll talk about implications, and sort of in the last bit we're going to get on to broader forms of social violence. So the bottom line is, it really looks like these income shocks, these extreme rainfall shocks, are leading to violence against women, elderly women, and there's some suggestive evidence that within household conflicts or resource scarcity is part of the story. Now, when I say similar findings to medieval European witch killings, the sort of mechanisms were different with these village-level killings, but there is a paper, if you're interested in it, by a professor at U Chicago, Emily Oster, who looks at extreme weather, in her case extreme cold, in medieval Germany, and finds that there were spikes in witch killing in the really brutally cold years, and those were really years of harvest failure. So there's a finding that harvest failure is associated with witch killing there, and a little kind of factoid for those who were interested in this stuff, that the Salem witch killings in the US, 1691, 1692, occurred in the coldest year on record over the last millennium or something in North America. So there's something about extreme climatic circumstances in agricultural societies that can lead to violence, that can lead to a breakdown in social norms, and the European findings are interesting in that regard. And when we think about why this is happening, we have to keep in mind all the things we talked about in the Udry paper. People do have some mechanisms for smoothing economic shocks, maybe from their friends nearby, but there's very limited formal savings mechanisms, banking, formal insurance. Basically, credit markets and financial markets are underdeveloped, and they may work well enough locally if I have a health shock and you don't, and we can self-insure a little bit, but for a large-scale, regional weather shock, they're not going to be that useful. Yeah.
So kind of looking forward to the future. Climate change is going to increase the variability of weather events.
Yeah. Yep.
You see, increased access to other jobs and so forth.
Yeah.
This informal social safety net maybe improving in some ways, maybe not in others. Do you think we're going to see more witch killings in the future as a result of more dramatic shifts in climate, or do you think that the other voices are going to happen?
I'm going to say about that in a few slides. Let me anticipate a little bit. It's that exact question is one of the things I'm working on now with my ongoing research for violence more broadly. All the data we have suggests, all the African data we have suggests that if you look at sort of the distribution of average temperatures across Africa today, most African countries, their mean annual temperature across all times of day or something, looks something like this. It's like low to mid 20s Celsius. This is Celsius degrees in density. And the median prediction from the climate models, and there's a lot of climate models and there's different emission scenarios, it's pretty complicated, but the median prediction is this is going to shift to the right by about 2 degrees Celsius, so about 3 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit by 2050. That's actually a pretty big change. And the reason why this is a big concern, why I think what you're saying you're onto something, is if you look at the sensitivity of African agriculture, like yields, to anomalously high temperature, if you're kind of down in the low 20s, it's sort of okay to get up to 23 or 24 degrees. Once you start getting into the high 20s, there's probably just some biological mechanism within the plants that once you get to like 28, 29 degrees, you see huge drops in yields. So if we're actually getting to the point where lots of African countries' mean temperatures are in the high 20s, there's going to have to be a lot of either shifting out of agriculture, which is going on, but going on slowly. It isn't as big an economic boom as we saw in East Asia, or development of new technologies, new crops that are really temperature resistant. We're nowhere close to developing those, just in terms of the R&D. So it's a huge issue. And so for all the things we've been talking about that are positive developments in Africa, from democratization to income growth, urbanization, all those things are going to help development of financial markets, all those things are going to help blunt the impact of climate change. But it's a race against time, because if in 2040 or 2050, most of Africa is still agrarian, based on the agricultural sector is really large, and we get to those temperatures, yields are going to start falling a lot. Yields could fall 10, 20% on average. So anyway, this is a very active area of debate right now, and but not enough research has really been done on how people can insure themselves against those shocks. Yeah.
So, prescription of offering financial services to these people, does this presume on if this issue of disbelief of witches is truly a religiously held belief,
Yeah.
then is it right to presume that financial services would reverse this trend? Or does this finding suggest that on some subconscious level, people in these villages realize that the justification for killing these women, or just what we spoke as a religiously legitimized way to rationality?
That's very hard to know. I do know based on the time I've spent there and reading as well that witchcraft beliefs are very widely held. I mean, people don't really wink when they talk about them. I mean, they're quite widely held in this part of Tanzania. So I think it's legit that people think these women are witches. Now, all of us in all realms of our life rationalize certain decisions based on reason A, but maybe there's an underlying reason B why we're doing them, and it's very hard to understand that psychology, and I don't sort of claim to. I guess the reason why the financial services could help is we do know that the level of witch killing, even though witch killing at baseline, even in good years, there's some witch killing, it's so much less severe in the good economic years than in the bad economic years. So even if we couldn't eliminate all of it, even if there's always going to be some you think of purely religiously inspired witch killing, we could at least reduce it by half or something if we didn't have the economic shock. So I think the financial services prescription could deal with that part of the variation, even if it didn't drive it all down to zero. Other people have seen this paper and seen this as a rationale for missionary activity. That's not my position. But if you think it's a religious belief, you can take it wherever you want. Another point here, I will say that one thing that has come down in the last decade beyond the witch killing of the elderly, but that is consistent with the models, there are well-documented cases, especially during civil wars and other periods of extreme stress, of child witch accusations. So very young children, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 8-year-olds, being accused of being witches in DRC, in Angola, etc. Not with 2 cases, but like hundreds of cases of children being killed in these desperate years. So this is another pattern that is sort of consistent with the model, in that if it's not the elderly, it'll be the very young who would be least productive that might get targeted by this. How a 5-year-old is going to have these witch powers to curse their family, I don't understand. But this has been a big issue in some settings. So this may have an economic rationale. Again, it's hard to fully understand. One of the things that we talked about last time a little bit, but I want to talk about more, is why women and not men. And that brings us to our next clicker question. Where before we talk about it, I want to get people's kind of gut instinct or intuition on what's most important. Why is it that women are being attacked? Is it their social isolation due to traditional marriage customs? So the custom in this part of Tanzania is women leave their home village to move elsewhere. They marry outside of their clan. They marry outside of their village. So they're not surrounded by their cousins and their siblings, but men are. That's one. 2, elderly women lack political power. There are no women on the Sungu Sungu, for instance. This is an all-male elders council. And there are very few women village, what we call VEOs, village executive officer. Is it because women are the least economically productive? So if you take the economic model to the next step, you would say maybe they're the least productive, so that's why they're being targeted? Is it that there's some chance that this old man, because he's a little bit taller or has slightly higher upper body strength or whatever differences there are on average, is a less attractive target to kill because he may grab a machete out of your hand or something? Or are there multiple explanations / who knows, would be